Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's your boy HP, and you're listening to the Unsportsmanlike Conduct Podcast. For all my new listeners out there, the Unsportsmanlike Conduct Podcast is going to cover football, my beloved New York Giants, some baseball and basketball from time to time, and just any other current events that are impacting our sports world. Before I get into the agenda for today's episode, everyone please follow my Instagram page. That's _unsportsmanlike_conduct. Again, that's _unsportsmanlike_conduct. Also, if you're listening to this episode, you might as well subscribe. So please make sure you subscribe to whether you're listening to it on YouTube or SoundCloud. Okay, episode 4. In last week's episode, in episode 3, I put a lot of pressure on David Gettleman to execute in this year's NFL draft. Now we are 1 week away from the NFL draft, and I'm going to explain why Dave Gettleman is primed to put a competitive product out there sooner rather than later. Trust in Gettleman. Russell Wilson signed a mega 4-year, $140 million contract. He deserves every single penny of it. Why? Because he is the be-all, end-all for the Seattle Seahawks offense. And Dallas Cowboys quarterback Dak Prescott is currently in ongoing negotiations with the Dallas Cowboys management on a contract extension. I'm going to explain why he doesn't deserve nearly the money that Russell Wilson does. Welcome back, everyone, to episode 4 of Unsportsmanlike Conduct. Thanks for tuning in. Let's get this episode started. So, last episode I spent a lot of time talking about why this year's NFL draft is such a big NFL draft for the New York Giants franchise. It's a franchise-shifting draft. This is probably the most important NFL draft for the New York Giants, probably in the last decade or so. And this is probably the most important NFL draft of Dave Gettleman's entire general manager career. But within putting so much pressure on Dave Gettleman, I think he has a plan, and I'm pretty excited to see what he's going to do next weekend on April 25th. That's when the NFL draft starts. Dave Gettleman has done some pretty strategic moves. I think if a poll came out today asking New York Giants fans on whether they're satisfied with, some of the moves that Dave Gettleman have made, I think a majority of them would say no. But if I were to answer that poll, I would put a big yes. And I want to take a couple of steps back to when he first became the general manager for the New York Giants. Dave Gettleman traded Jason Pierre-Paul to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for a 3rd and a 4th round draft pick. In that year's draft, we ended up having 2 third-round draft picks because of that deal. And it was a smart move because Jason Pierre-Paul is a traditional 4-3 defensive end, and we were turning into a 3-4 defensive scheme. Pierre-Paul wasn't going to fit that scheme. He wasn't going to be effective in that scheme. So it made sense to trade him. And we got 2 players within that 3rd round that became immediate impact players for the New York Giants. People aren't happy with Dave Gettleman. People are confused. I think heading into this NFL draft, people are anxious, nervous, confused, and somewhat excited too, hoping that he nails these draft picks. And I think he will, because he's slowly rebuilding this team from the ground up. He's done some really great things since he's been here, and I know it's hard to see that given our win-loss record, given the product that's on the field. But you just have to be patient. Some of this stuff takes time. Look at the Boston Celtics. I know it's different sports, but I think that's a perfect example. They had the big 3, right? They had the Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, Ray Allen, right? And then they even had Rajon Rondo. Then when all those players left the team, I'm sure Boston Celtics fans and all the other NBA fans were like, wait a minute. This team competed for several years, and now they're just tearing it apart. But then within a matter of a couple of years, this team not only became competitive, playoff contenders, and now this year possibly a team that's potentially going to make it to at least the conference finals. There's a lot of good things in store, and I'm pretty excited to see what we're going to do with this. And I want to take a couple of steps back and revisit 2018's NFL draft, because I want to use that draft to give you guys some sort of confidence heading into this year's draft, 1 week away. Dave Gettleman drafted really well last year. I'm very happy with the way he drafted and the players that we picked. And granted, we picked 2nd overall, so you would think at that point it's easier to pick talent, but you'd be surprised. Because there are so many NFL teams that year in and year out, they end up having top 10 picks. They end up being in the lottery. So I want to start off with round one when we drafted Saquon Barkley. No brainer there, right? Once-in-a-lifetime generational running back talent. Great running back, great receiving back out of the backfield. Had a tremendous year, 1,300 rushing yards, 91 receptions. When your running back's a dual threat, what you need in today's game, you take that any day. Saquon Barkley was obviously a great pick. He was destined to go within the first 5 picks, so that was a no-brainer. To a lot of teams, that is. But think about it. That was probably the first year where probably a lot of New York Giants fans and the rest of the NFL analysts and all these sports networks thought the New York Giants should take a quarterback. Last year's draft was arguably the best quarterback class that we've had in the last decade or so. Sam Darnold, Josh Rosen, Baker Mayfield, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. Those guys were primed. Those guys are still primed to be great quarterbacks. Some of them have good years. Some of them had good years. Some of them had decent years. Some of them are still working on their game, right? It's just 1 year, but it was a great quarterback class. Including myself. I was one of the Giants fans that thought, why not draft Josh Rosen? Have him sit with under Eli for a year or two. Then by the time Eli is officially done retiring on his own, that is, not pushing him out of town, but him retiring on his own, Josh Rosen can come in, get the keys to the offense, and he'll be ready to go. Similar to sort of like that Pat Mahomes and even like the Aaron Rodgers, Brett Favre situation. But the reason why Dave Gettleman drafted Saquon Barkley is because the Giants team wasn't ready to compete yet. Why bring in a quarterback if you know it's going to take a couple of years to rebuild this team to compete? So Gettleman decided, I'm going to take a player that can start day one with number 2 overall. That's the tricky thing. You don't want to draft a quarterback number 2 overall and then have him sit for a year or two. And then you find out a couple of years later it's not going to work out with this quarterback. With a quarterback, you don't want to make a big mistake like that, right? You want to be very, very careful. So it made so much sense to pick a all-star premier running back. Saquon Barkley, look, I don't expect Saquon Barkley to repeat 1,300 rushing yards and 91 receptions. That's a lot. That's hard to do because those are such great stats. It's hard to repeat those numbers. But I think you'll have somewhat of the same year that he had in his rookie year. I imagine him to get between 1,000 and 1,300 rushing yards. And you know what? I won't say he'll have 91 receptions. I'll drop that to maybe like 20 to 30 receptions less. He'll definitely have within the 60 to 70 reception range. He may even score more touchdowns, actually, given that we're probably turning into a more run offense first than a pass offense. But Gettleman drafted Saquon Barkley, and it showed how much of an impact a good running game can have on this offense. The first time in a very, very long time. The first time since we had that three-headed monster in Brandon Jacobs, Ahmad Bradshaw, and Derek Ward. And unless you're a New York Giants fan or a diehard fan of a team that's in the NFC East, those running backs are forgettable, okay? I'm going to be honest. But there were good enough running backs to be effective at the time because our offensive line was so good during that Super Bowl run. That's why we won the Super Bowl that year. Because we were able to push when we had to for the running game, and we were able to protect Eli. And Dave Gettleman, he's sort of following that strategy again. Remember, before the draft, he signed Nate Soldier, left tackle who previously played for the New England Patriots, was a stud for the New England Patriots. Patriot fans, that was a big question mark for them. They're wondering why the Patriots didn't re-sign Nate Soldier. So Gettleman comes into this draft, says, I'm going to get a running back, and then to further establish the run game, I'm going to also get a guard. And so we drafted Will Hernandez. Because when you can get interior and exterior offensive linemen, you can help the running back either run to the outside, up the sideline, or within the tackles. So it was a great pick. And don't get me wrong, I'm aware. Nate Soldier and Will Hernandez, The whole offensive line actually had a rough first half of the year last year. But the thing is with an offensive line, an offensive line, they all have to be good. Everyone has to be clicking. Everyone has to be firing on all cylinders. It's a unit. Your offensive line is a unit that gets ranked. It's very different than every other position in the NFL, rather any other position in sports. You can't rely on one player to be your best player on an offensive line. Otherwise, that whole unit won't work. Think about it, right? On the offensive side, you can have one good receiver or one good tight end, and your pass game might be pretty effective. The clear case is Beckham. Beckham for a couple of years was our only offensive threat, and we made it work. We were driving down the field by just finding Beckham open. A lot of teams do that. Same thing with the defensive line. You may not have the greatest run stoppers in your interior of the defensive line, but as long as you have edge rushers, your edge rushers can still get to the quarterback and be effective when there's running plays that are sweep plays or toss plays. But with an offensive line, everyone has to be good, because then it just won't work. It's easier to scheme. It's easier to attack the weakness of an offensive line. And so once they got going at the second half, after the bye week, this offensive line was doing fine. We were giving up less pressures, especially Nate Soldier and Will Hernandez. They gave up way less pressures than they did in the first half of the season. Eli Manning had more time to throw the ball, go through his route progressions. Saquon Barkley, guys, he finished with 1,300 yards. Folks, you cannot run for 1,300 yards without having a good offensive line. I don't care who you are. You need to have a good, formidable offensive line to do so. So Dave Gettleman said, I'm going to build this running game because the New York Giants did not have a running game since the last time they won a Super Bowl. So he drafts a premier running back and a stud left guard, in consideration that they know they just recently signed a left tackle in Nate Soldier. And I mentioned that Jason Pierre-Paul trade earlier in that offseason, where we ended up getting a third-round pick. We ended up getting pick 69. The reason why that pick was so important is because we already had pick number 66 in the third round. So we picked twice, but it was only a couple of picks away from each other. Then with the 66th pick, they ended up drafting Lorenzo Carter, linebacker out of Georgia. I wish they would play Lorenzo Carter more, but for the amount of snaps that he was effective. And I'm going to break it down a little bit more. I was looking up some stats a little bit, and so he had 43 tackles for the year, and he had about 4 sacks last year as well, and 4 pass deflections. That's pretty good for a rookie linebacker who doesn't play that much. Lorenzo Carter, coming out of college, was a pass rushing linebacker. He's not really considered an all-down linebacker, which I disagree with. The reason why linebackers get sort of pigeonholed by becoming, just very one-dimensional linebackers is because of the schemes and the coaches that run plays for them in college. How can a linebacker get better if your current NFL team doesn't allow you to get more snaps? Lorenzo Carter is a good linebacker. I'm going to break it down a little bit more. So out of the 43 tackles that he had last year, 20 of those tackles, that's almost half, came from when the opposing team was driving between their own 49-yard line through the Giants' own 20-yard line. Think about it. That's the most important part of the field, because that's where you have to get stops. That's where you have to either force that team to kick a field goal or hopefully they go 3 and out before they reach the Giants' 40-yard line, right? So within that time, between the opposing 49-yard line and the Giants' 20-yard line, Lorenzo Carter had half of his tackles. Within that same time, Lorenzo Carter also had 3 of his sacks. That's pretty impressive. And in addition to having 3 of those sacks, he also had 3 pass deflections. So regarding field position, again, between the 49 and the 20-yard line, Lorenzo Carter was the most effective. So you know what that tells me? That tells me in crunch time, when the defense has to get a key stop, he can be effective. And I just saw a recent interview of Lorenzo Carter on Giants.com, and he's actually bulked up. So he's getting a little bigger. He was a little undersized when he came out of college, which I also think contributes to why he wasn't considered a every down linebacker. But yeah, I look forward to him to executing even more next year, this coming season rather. He didn't start all 16 games. He only started 2 games, but he played in 15. You know, you don't have to start every game, but as long as you play in almost all of them, I'm okay with that. And just to be clear, Lorenzo Carter just wasn't playing, because he was a special teams player. No, he was there because James Bettcher wanted him in there. 43 tackles, 4 sacks, 4 pass deflections. That's pretty good, man. That's really, really good. And just to like further show that Gettleman is getting players that can make an immediate impact in day one. Obviously, we know Saquon Barkley played all 16 games, started 16 games. Obviously, he was Rookie of the Year. We know the impact that he had. But Will Hernandez played all 16, started all 16. He's getting guys that you can plug in immediately. That's what he did last year. And so Lorenzo Carter, we got him at pick 66. At pick 69, we get B.J. Hill, defensive lineman. He also played all 16 games and started 12, which is very, very important because in the middle of the season, we ended up trading Snacks Harrison away to the Detroit Lions. B.J. Hill also had a good rookie year. He had 5 sacks. B.J. Hill was a traditional, I think he came out of NC State. He was a traditional nose tackle, and they moved him to defensive end because of the way the 3-4 defense is structured. And he had 5 sacks. That is pretty good. So in the third round, he gets 1 linebacker that gets them 4 sacks and 1 defensive lineman that gets them 5 sacks. And that's why they were so comfortable with trading Olivier Vernon. Because Olivier Vernon at best got you 8 sacks a year. So he was like, you know what, look, I don't want to pay all this money for a defensive end / outside linebacker that can't get me 10+ sacks guaranteed every year. That's why they were so comfortable with trading him away, because they saw we're getting some pretty good production from Lorenzo Carter and B.J. Hill, these young guys who are cheap as well. So within rounds 1 through 3, 4 picks that we had within rounds 1 through 3 last year were people that played either all of 16 games, with the exception of Lorenzo Carter, he played 15. He's finding immediate impact players for the New York Giants. And then rounds 4 and 5 is where he kind of dips off. Round 4, he spends it on quarterback Kyle Lawletta. We all know how that pick ended up. He's a scrub. And then round 5, R.J. McIntosh didn't play much, only played for 6 games. But then we also participated in the supplementary NFL draft. In that round 3, we ended up drafting a cornerback, Sam Beal. A lot of folks haven't heard of Sam Beal because he ended up getting injured before the season started last year. But he's healthy now, and he should be reporting to training camp this year. So I'm excited to see what he's going to have to do. And a lot of people are excited too. I'll be honest, I didn't know who he was. But I did my research, and a lot of people are excited about that pick and actually surprised that he didn't go in the regular NFL draft. So Gettleman's finding the right pieces. And so I think with that, you have to be confident that this year, given this year's draft is so deep with talent, he's going to be able to find players to plug immediately. We have 2 picks in the first round, a pick in the second round, a pick in the third round, and then 3 picks in the fourth round. That's 7 picks within the first 4 rounds of the NFL draft. And then 5, 6, and 7. Again, I said 5, 6, and 7, do what you want. But imagine between 5, 6, and 7, we find at least 1 player that ends up being a superstar. Dave Gettleman's going to have a lot of fun in this year's NFL draft. He can mess around in this draft, man. He's going to have tons of fun. And he came out saying that he has a lot of players graded, first, second, third, and fourth round picks. He has a lot of people graded in those rounds. So that just gives me a lot of confidence, and I'm excited to see what he's going to do with those picks. He's gonna use a lot of those picks to rebuild this team. If you're gonna use one of those 7 picks to get a quarterback, I'm okay with that, as long as he doesn't get a quarterback with the 6th overall pick. I just recently read that they're interested in Dwayne Haskins. I will flip out if we get Dwayne Haskins with 6th overall. Let's get Montez Sweat. I talked about him in my last episode. I think he's one of the more versatile defensive ends / outside linebackers in this draft class. I want him really, really badly. Apparently, he has a pre-disclosed heart condition that I think teams are shying away from. But that just comes with evaluation. You got to evaluate him, see if he can, see how serious this is. But if you're scared of him, hopefully there are other like Quinnen Williams is available at 6th overall. And he's supposed to be like a Aaron Donald impact type player. Get a pass rusher. Get a premier pass rusher with the 6th overall. I talked about it for almost since I started this podcast. Please draft A.J. Brown with pick number 17. But I'm okay with even if they don't decide to do that pick number 17. If you want to go defense again, then do that. Or if you want to draft Daniel Jones at number 17, then I'm okay with that too. Because I realize there's just so much draft capital. In 2 straight years, Gettleman has built up draft capital to put the New York Giants in a situation where they can find players to immediately plug in year 1. Not a lot of teams can say that. So guys, folks, New York Giants fans out there, be patient with Dave Gettleman and trust him, because I trust him. I'm usually the first one that complains about everything. Okay? Trust Gettleman. And to all the New York to all the New York Giant fans, not the fans, to all the New York Giants haters out there, beware of the Giants, because we're coming. Okay? We're going to be competitive, trust me. I believe Gettleman's going to nail this draft, and I can't wait till the NFL draft is over. And then on Saturday and Sunday, I'm spending time analyzing these draft picks, that by Monday morning, you guys can hear what I have to say and how happy I'm going to be about Gettleman's draft picks this year. He's done some great things. Trading Beckham was a great trade. Because you don't need star receivers to win championships. You don't need star receivers to win championships. You don't need to pay big money contracts to receivers. You need all-around teams. You need a rebuild from the ground up. You start with your defensive line. You start with your offensive line. Right? You restructure the secondary. I think our strongest position right now on our defense is our linebackers. And this is probably the first time in several years where linebacker is not a key position that we need. And you want to know why? Because Gettleman came in and he addressed linebacker as well. So not only did he address the offensive line of the run game, he came in and he got Lorenzo Carter as our linebacker in the NFL draft last year. He also traded for Alec Ogletree, who had a tremendous year for the New York Giants. Then he signed Kareem Martin, the outside linebacker from the Arizona Cardinals, who's a pretty good linebacker too. And then we currently have B.J. Goodson, but B.J. Goodson was probably our only good linebacker when Gettleman came on as GM. So he addressed 3 clear weaknesses within, a year and a half? He's only been through 1 full draft. So within a year and a half, he's addressed 3 key weaknesses. He rebuilt this offensive line through the draft and free agency. He's rebuilt our run game as a result of rebuilding the offensive line, and he's built a solidified linebacking core. And it will be interesting to see where Gettleman will actually pick a quarterback now. Because earlier this week, Russell Wilson signed a mega contract extension, 4 years, $140 million. Russell Wilson deserves every single penny of that contract. Russell Wilson is arguably a top 10 actually, no, it's not arguable. He is a top 10 quarterback. And, I slight Fox Sports and ESPN a lot. But, I do watch them because it is still entertainment at the end of the day. And then Skip Bayless said he doesn't think Russell Wilson is a top 10 quarterback, and he thinks Dak Prescott is better than Russell Wilson. That's freaking ludicrous. Russell Wilson, year in and year out, is the be-all, end-all of that Seattle Seahawks offense, is the reason why people like to see that Seattle Seahawks offense. Russell Wilson doesn't benefit from an offensive line the way Dak Prescott does. He doesn't benefit from a solid, premier running game the way Dak Prescott does. Are you kidding me? Russell Wilson consistently is the reason why the Seahawks are competitive. Russell Wilson has always had a major role. He always accounts for more than 50% of that offense's output, whether it's yardage or touchdowns. I can't believe what some of these guys are allowed to get away with what they say on television. Russell Wilson averages between 25 and 30 touchdowns a year. 3,500 to 4,000 yards a year. Dak Prescott's numbers don't match nowhere near what Russell Wilson puts up. And Russell Wilson has to deal with way less than what Dak Prescott does. It's unbelievable. He just recently came off of a 35 touchdown, 7 interception year, Russell Wilson. 34-11 the year prior to that. 21-11 the year prior to that. But you know what? He threw for 4,200 yards that year. Russell Wilson is definitely a top 10 quarterback. He's better than more than half of the quarterbacks that are in this league. We can actually go division by division. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go division by division and tell you which quarterbacks Russell Wilson is better than. Let's actually, I'm going to pull up the divisions now. Just want to make sure I have everything in order. All right, let's do this. The NFC East. We'll start with my beloved NFC East. As I mentioned, Russell Wilson is definitely better than Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott has never been given that much responsibilities for his offense. He is not the reason why that Dallas Cowboys offense is as good as it is. It's because of Ezekiel Elliott and that offensive line. I know this past year that offensive line wasn't as great as prior years, but it was still good enough. The Washington Redskins, who the hell is their starting quarterback? Who is it? What is it, Case Keenum? Case Keenum is nowhere near as good as Russell Wilson. Case Keenum had one good year with the Minnesota Vikings, and now he's getting tossed around. Went to the Denver Broncos, lasted 1 year, and now he's on the Washington Redskins. The Broncos rather have a beaten-up Joe Flacco than Case Keenum. That just goes to show you how good the Broncos thought Case Keenum was for them. And Eli, I love you so much. I grew up watching you. I'm watching you now as I mature and as I'm an adult. You are my favorite quarterback in the world because you're a New York Giants quarterback. But I have to admit it, Russell Wilson is better than Eli Manning. Eli Manning isn't nowhere, I wouldn't say nowhere near, but Eli Manning isn't as accurate as Russell Wilson is. And Eli Manning isn't as smart with the ball as Russell Wilson is. We all say Eli Manning has a high IQ. Maybe he does. But once that snap is called, he makes some pretty bad decisions. Russell Wilson doesn't average 15, 16, 17 interceptions a year. His cap is usually at 11, 12 interceptions. And the Eagles quarterback, Carson Wentz. This is probably the only quarterback in the NFC East that I don't think Russell Wilson is that much better than. Russell Wilson and Carson Wentz, to me, are very, very similar quarterbacks from a style of play standpoint. Carson Wentz is obviously more bigger than Russell Wilson, is a little more tall, is definitely more taller than Russell Wilson is, but they play the very same way. They move in and out of the pocket. When the pocket breaks down, they know how to scramble a little bit. Not necessarily scramble for yardage, but essentially scramble around the line of scrimmage and find the open receiver. But the fact that Russell Wilson is able to do it consistently, knowing that offensive line is nowhere near as good as the Eagles' offensive line is, and Russell Wilson has to do this by being significantly shorter than Carson Wentz is, which is even more amazing. But they both have very, very similar styles of play. So I think that one's a toss-up for me. I won't say Russell Wilson is better than Carson Wentz. I would say they're about the same. I would say that they're about the same. Then we go to the NFC North, and this division is decently stacked with quarterbacks. We find another quarterback with the Green Bay Packers in Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson have very, very similar styles of play. They know how to go in and out, left to right within the pocket. When the pocket breaks down, they know how to improvise and find the open receiver. They're able to stand up and sit back longer than any other quarterbacks in the league because they're just so agile and quick with their feet. And the reason why I like watching these two quarterbacks is because they know they can scramble, but they know the better play is to just hold on to the ball because they know eventually those DBs can't continue to defend these receivers. It is very hard to follow your receiver for more than 3 seconds. After 3 seconds, the secondary breaks down. That's why quarterbacks like Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, even Carson Wentz, they're able to move around the pocket and find that open receiver. So I would say that's a toss-up. But Russell Wilson is better than the Minnesota Vikings quarterback Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins is what you call Mr. Inconsistency. But nevertheless, Kirk Cousins is a very important piece to the Minnesota Vikings as he was on the Redskins. He's responsible for a lot of their offense. If they don't play well, they can't rely on their run game the way Dak Prescott can. But Russell Wilson is better than Kirk Cousins. Russell Wilson is better than Mitch Trubisky. Mitch Trubisky is who you call a classic game manager. And I also think Russell Wilson is better than Matthew Stafford, Detroit Lions. Don't get me wrong, I'm a big Matthew Stafford fan. He's a good quarterback. But Matthew Stafford makes a lot of mistakes. Takes way too many chances, and he takes bad chances. Too many times he forces the ball. And at times, I don't think it's always his fault. The Detroit Lions, year in and year out since Matthew Stafford has been in the league, have failed to provide him a decent offensive line and a decent run game. How many times have the Detroit Lions had to shuffle in new running backs every single year? You can't even rely on these running backs for fantasy football purposes. Those are the running backs I usually stay away from. That has always been a pass-oriented team, and they never gave him the right support from an offensive line and running game standpoint. But again, he takes way too many chances, a lot of boneheaded throws, a lot of throws that are questionable. Russell Wilson is very careful with the football. Doesn't make mistakes like Matthew Stafford does. Matthew Stafford has a lot of heat check moments where he's feeling himself. He's driving the ball down the field. The offense is going. And then he just makes the wrong plays. But look, there have been plenty of times where Matthew Stafford has led game-winning drives. Has been very, very clutch for the Detroit Lions. But he just throws way too many interceptions for me to even compare his sort of decision-making and accuracy to Russell Wilson. And then the NFC North. I want to start with the Atlanta Falcons. Russell Wilson, to me, is better than Matt Ryan. Russell Wilson didn't benefit from a receiving core the way Matt Ryan does. Matt Ryan has Julio Jones, who's one of the best receivers in the NFL. Calvin Ridley, rookie that they drafted last year, had a great rookie year and is definitely someone that they know that they can rely on in addition to Julio Jones. Mohamed Sanu, veteran receiver, has good hands as a possession receiver and is someone who's definitely reliable. And then from a tight end, Austin Hooper. And then Matt Ryan's also had a decent run game. He's had Devontae Freeman, Tevin Coleman. Tevin Coleman's on the 49ers now, and the reason why the Falcons didn't re-sign Tevin Coleman is because they have Ito Smith. So the Falcons also have always had pretty good running backs for Matt Ryan. Russell Wilson hasn't. And also, I would say Russell Wilson is more clutch than Matt Ryan is. Matt Ryan is good between quarters 1 through 3. Then in crunch time, I don't always, Matt Ryan isn't always the greatest during crunch time. But Russell Wilson is. Russell Wilson is clutch, man. Always knows how to make the right throws at the right time, makes the right plays at the right time. In game-defying moments. The New Orleans Saints, Drew Brees. This is tough for me. Drew Brees is a really, really good quarterback. Him and Russell Wilson, they just take care of the ball very well, are very, very accurate. They may be, give or take, around the same height as well. So they both sort of face this, similar sort of struggles when it comes to, undersized quarterbacks. But Russell Wilson is more elusive, is a little more crafty and shifty within the line of scrimmage and within the pocket. As the pocket breaks down, he knows how to move in and out of the pocket and find open receivers and be a little, be able to improvise. Whereas Drew Brees really can't. But nevertheless, they're both great throwers, and this one's a toss-up. It's a little hard for me to, choose on who's better, either Russell Wilson or Drew Brees. But if you were to ask me today who would I want to sign to start for the Giants, I would take Russell Wilson simply because Russell Wilson is younger than Drew Brees is. Also, Russell Wilson has been part of a Seattle Seahawks team that's been very defense and run-oriented. Even though their running game hasn't been great, except for last season where it finally came around and they finally had a 1,000-yard, legitimate 1,000-yard lead back rusher. Their running game has been a little bit scarce, but they've always been tried to be that ground and pound offense, and have been very, very reliant on their defense. Whereas Drew Brees has been always, been involved with a high-powered offense. He has Alvin Kamara, Michael Thomas. They just signed Jared Cook. They used Darren Sproles for a while, a couple of years ago. So they always had some sort of players that just knew how to make big plays. So I think Drew Brees has had more weapons to work with throughout his career than Russell Wilson has. And I'm not saying Russell Wilson has never had weapons. He's had some decent weapons. He has, Tyler Lockett. He's had Jimmy Graham. Jimmy Graham never worked out. Didn't really work out for the Seattle Seahawks, but he had Jimmy Graham, Doug Baldwin. But those guys are second-tier players. Those guys are grade B players. Those aren't Michael Thomases or the Alvin Kamaras of the world. And even when Marshawn Lynch was the running back for the Seattle Seahawks, he wasn't a top 5 running back. He was just a good running back. Alvin Kamara is poised to be number 1 overall in fantasy football for almost every league. If it isn't him, it's a toss-up between him and Christian McCaffrey, probably. And then the Carolina Panthers, Cam Newton. Cam Newton's very inconsistent and at times is very inaccurate. And I think Cam Newton also struggles with finding that balance. Still to this point in his career, finding that balance of when I should tuck and run with the football and when I should still hold on, sit tight, and let the receivers progress during their routes and find an open receiver. Ever since that Super Bowl run that the Carolina Panthers had, Cam Newton hasn't really been the same. He's been decent, he's been good at times, but he hasn't been the same. Whereas Russell Wilson, has always been on a trajectory year in and year out. Always performing well. There hasn't been any sort of signs where people can, sort of sit back and say, hey, well, Russell Wilson is struggling this year. Russell Wilson is always consistently talked about as an MVP candidate. Where Cam Newton has only had one MVP season, which is during that Super Bowl run season. And then the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But I really need to talk about Jameis Winston. I don't think I need to really analyze much there. Clearly, Russell Wilson is better than Jameis Winston. And then lastly, the NFC West. Russell Wilson is better than Josh Rosen. He's better than Jimmy Garoppolo. Both of those quarterbacks haven't done enough and haven't proven to be successful enough quarterbacks yet. It isn't even fair to compare those two quarterbacks because Russell Wilson is absolutely on a different level than those two. And then Jared Goff, quarterback from the St. Louis Rams. The Los Angeles Rams, rather. I don't see what's so special about Jared Goff. Jared Goff, to me, is a product of that system and a genius head coach with Sean McVay. Jared Goff has a top 5 running back in Todd Gurley. Jared Goff has good receivers around him. Brandon Cooks, Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, even Tyler Higbee at tight end. Oh, also Josh Reynolds, another receiver. When Cooper Kupp went down, they had Josh Reynolds waiting on the bench, ready to fill in for him. Russell Wilson hasn't had that luxury in his career, where he's had a complete set of offensive weapons, the way Jared Goff has. Jared Goff also has a good offensive line, something that Russell Wilson hasn't always had in his career. And then I'm going to jump to the AFC Conference, the AFC East Division, the Buffalo Bills. Josh Allen had a good rookie season towards the end of last year because him and the Buffalo Bills realized he is much more effective with his legs running the football than he is passing the football. That is not a recipe for a good quarterback. Josh Allen is your typical quarterback that has a strong rocket arm but cannot make every throw in the NFL. Cannot always hit the tight windows. Will not always be accurate. And I could be a little unfair on Josh Allen because he's a rookie. But right now, I'm taking Russell Wilson over Josh Allen any single given Sunday. Miami Dolphins. Can anybody tell me who the quarterback for the Miami Dolphins is? Because I don't know. Ryan Tannehill got traded to the Tennessee Titans. Who the hell is the quarterback for the Miami Dolphins? For this game that I'm playing, for this analysis that I'm doing, I'm going to throw in a new rule. I'm going to cheat. Because I don't know the quarterback of the Miami Dolphins, Russell Wilson is automatically better than that quarterback. There's no way whoever that quarterback is, whoever's on that depth chart, is better than Russell Wilson. Because if he was worth mentioning, I would know him, and I would bring him up and I would analyze him and compare him the way I've been doing so far through this segment with the other teams and the other quarterbacks. Sam Darnold, New York Jets, rookie quarterback, didn't have the greatest rookie year. Russell Wilson immediately came into the NFL and dominated. Showed that he was a mature quarterback. I remember after his rookie year, people were considering Russell Wilson automatically a top 10 quarterback in their rankings. Sam Darnold isn't even in the top 10 right now. And the New England Patriots, this is probably the only quarterback that Russell Wilson isn't better than. Tom Brady is better than Russell Wilson. And I won't even have that debate. He just is. Tom Brady is the best quarterback in the NFL. And until he retires, he will always be the best quarterback in the NFL. And I hate the Patriots and I hate Tom Brady. But I have to be objective here. I have to be fair here. The AFC North, the Baltimore Ravens. Lamar Jackson is very, very similar to Josh Allen. Has a good rocket arm. But similar to Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson did well in his rookie year because the Baltimore Ravens realized he is more effective running the football than he is throwing the football. And again, that is not a recipe for a good quarterback. I do not want my quarterback to be more effective with his legs than with his arms. Okay? Russell Wilson is good at both. But Russell Wilson doesn't rely on his legs because he's so good throwing the football. The Cincinnati Bengals. Andy Dalton. Russell Wilson is better than Andy Dalton. Too many times is Andy Dalton a no-show. Mr. Irrelevant at times, inconsistent. Russell Wilson literally, again, is the be-all, end-all for that Seattle Seahawks offense and has been for quite some time. There have been even, instances where the Bengals have even thought of not even re-signing Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton had to prove himself to get a contract. It was a wait-and-see moment with that. Not with Russell Wilson. That's why Russell Wilson has gotten a 4-year, $140 million contract. There's a reason why Russell Wilson is getting paid $35 million a year, and Andy Dalton's getting paid $16 million a year. That's almost double the money because he's just as good. He's literally that much more better than Andy Dalton. He is twice as good as Andy Dalton. Baker Mayfield, Cleveland Browns. A little too soon yet. This could be the one where, Baker Mayfield can continue to put up good stats year in, year out. This might be a good toss-up. This might be a good comparison, but it's a little too soon for me to say a rookie quarterback who's had a good offensive line to work with. Look, the Cleveland Browns have a good offensive line. That's why they were comfortable to trade Kevin Zeitler to the New York Giants. Because they're comfortable and they're confident within that unit to still perform without Kevin Zeitler, who is a stud guard. And then Ben Roethlisberger. I think Russell Wilson is better than Ben Roethlisberger. I think Roethlisberger is also just another one of those quarterbacks that, look, he's a tremendous quarterback, a Hall of Fame quarterback, of course, but at times just has his heat check moments. And there's just always been these rumors the last couple of years where Ben Roethlisberger isn't a good leader, isn't always in it, questions whether he still wants to continue to play. And again, that's a difference because, Ben Roethlisberger has played more years, obviously, than Russell Wilson has. So, we won't be hearing things like that out of Russell Wilson for quite some time. But nevertheless, for that to even hit the public, for that to even hit the media, and to be, in the current events for your team, is definitely a distraction, with which Russell Wilson has never been a distraction for the Seattle Seahawks. And then the AFC South. This is where it gets a little tricky. Because it's hard for me to say whether Russell Wilson is better than Andrew Luck and Deshaun Watson. But let's start with the Indianapolis Colts. Let's start with Andrew Luck. The edge I give Russell Wilson over Andrew Luck is because Russell Wilson is more accurate than Andrew Luck is, and he's a more better decision maker than Andrew Luck is. Russell Wilson has had plenty of seasons ending with a QBR over 100. Russell Wilson's career high of interceptions in a year is 11 interceptions. Andrew Luck has thrown 15, 16 interceptions. Andrew Luck is shown to be careless with the football, especially sometimes in key moments of the game. And I'm not saying Andrew Luck isn't clutch. Of course Andrew Luck is clutch. We've seen it every single year that he's played. There have been games where he's literally the reason why the Indianapolis Colts have won games, have made it to the playoffs when they have, the couple of times that they've had under his tenure as a quarterback for the Colts. But, if you were to ask me for one game, who am I going to trust to win that game for me, that one big game, I'm going to take Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson is more poised under pressure and just always knows the right place to make. He just makes it look so easy. And then with Deshaun Watson, Deshaun Watson is a good quarterback, man. To me, he's essentially Russell Wilson, but taller. Deshaun Watson is 6'3", Russell Wilson is 5'11". Deshaun Watson is slowly going to become a top 10 quarterback in the NFL, if not already. Very, it's very similar to Russell Wilson. Deshaun Watson is responsible, is the be-all, end-all for that offense. He needs to get his receivers the ball. Luckily, he has, a DeAndre Hopkins, Will Fuller. But his running game always stinks. Lamar Miller has been their running back over the last couple of years. Lamar Miller isn't a good running back. He's an average running back at best. So for this one, I'm going to consider that a toss-up. Because, I can't really make the argument that Russell Wilson is that much better than Deshaun Watson. I think they're both equally good quarterbacks. Jacksonville Jaguar, Nick Foles. Nick Foles, to me, is a flash in the pan. I don't think he's as good as a lot of people are making him out to be. I think he's currently overpaid. And just no question, I think Russell Wilson is better than Nick Foles. Russell Wilson is better than both of Tennessee's quarterbacks, Marcus Mariota and Ryan Tannehill. And then to end this portion of the segment, we're going to end with the AFC West. Denver Broncos, Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco is literally at the tail end of his career. Not even sure what the Broncos were doing with signing Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco right now is a scrub, is unreliable, and has too many lingering health issues. It's not even comparable. I wouldn't even compare Joe Flacco's best years, his prime years, to Russell Wilson now. And this division has some pretty good quarterbacks as well. Because then we go to the Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. Threw for 50 touchdowns. Was an MVP. Led a high-powered offense. But that's the key word. He led a high-powered offense. He had Tyreek Hill, Sammy Watkins, Travis Kelce, Kareem Hunt in that running game. And then when Kareem Hunt got suspended, they had Damian Williams, who's tremendous for this Kansas City Chiefs and was one of the main reasons why I won my Fantasy Football League championship last year. Russell Wilson doesn't have those luxuries the way Patrick Mahomes does. I don't think Patrick Mahomes can throw 50 touchdowns. I don't think Patrick Mahomes can throw 40 touchdowns without having that type of offense around him. I think Patrick Mahomes is a good quarterback, and I think he'll continue to be successful, but it'll be very, very interesting this coming season because they won't have Kareem Hunt, and they may not have Tyreek Hill for some of their games because Tyreek Hill is currently, is I think under investigation over the child abuse allegations, and he may even get suspended, and I've even read or released. So that is going to be something to watch because if Tyreek Hill, who is probably the best receiver in stretching defenses and stretching the field, if you don't have a guy like that, it is very, very hard to replicate those numbers and to replicate the output that offense did last year. So I would say Russell Wilson right now is better than Patrick Mahomes. It all goes back to I wonder what Russell Wilson can do if he had the similar tools, the similar toys that Patrick Mahomes has. Phillip Rivers. Phillip Rivers is a good quarterback too. This is where it gets a little tough because this division again has good quarterbacks. Phillip Rivers is a good quarterback. But it kind of goes back to the age standpoint. I'm doing this analysis to determine who would I want to start for my team today. I would pick Russell Wilson because he's younger. He has 5, 6, even 7 more years left. Phillip Rivers is 37 years old. Who knows how much years he has left? It almost looked like Phillip Rivers was possibly on the decline a little bit. I mean, he was throwing over 4,000 yards a year. For what was pretty much from 2013 and on, he was throwing over 4,000 yards a year. But he is careless with the football. He's had years where he's thrown 15 interceptions, 20, 15 again, 18, 21. Russell Wilson doesn't throw the ball sporadically like that. Phillip Rivers is a bit of a wild card sometimes. And so I give the edge to Russell Wilson. But Phillip Rivers, I'm looking at these numbers. These are insane numbers. To throw for 4,000 yards, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years in a row? And then out of those 6 years in a row, 1, 2, 3, 4 of those years, he threw over 30 touchdowns. Phillip Rivers He's a baller, man. He puts up some pretty good numbers. But again, within that same time frame, he's had some pretty bad years in regards to interceptions. Had 18 interceptions, 21 interceptions. That is way too many turnovers. His QBR was 87.9 in 2016, which isn't that great. Russell Wilson is just a model of consistency. You'll never get high turnover rates from Russell Wilson, so I'm going to give that edge over Phillip Rivers. And then the Oakland Raiders, Derek Carr. I think Russell Wilson is better than Derek Carr. Russell Wilson is a gamer. I feel at times, even in the last year, a lot of people question Derek Carr's heart, his drive, his motivation. They're both good quarterbacks, obviously. I think Derek Carr is a really good quarterback, and I might be crazy for saying this, but, a couple of years ago, I compared Derek Carr to Aaron Rodgers. I thought he was going to be the next Aaron Rodgers. I mean, he isn't. He clearly isn't. That Raiders team was a mess last year, so, who knows? Who knows how he's going to do, this coming season? That's definitely something to watch, given that, they got Antonio Brown and Tyrell Williams. So that's going to be definitely something interesting to watch and see how he performs with those, with those weapons. But I wouldn't consider Derek Carr near Russell Wilson's level. I don't even think he's on the same tier. Russell Wilson is a Tier 1 quarterback. Derek Carr is a Tier 2, Tier 3 quarterback. And then that does it, man. That I literally just explained division by division, team by team, quarterback by quarterback, why Russell Wilson and how Russell Wilson is better than 3/4 of the quarterbacks in this league. Russell Wilson is a top 10 quarterback and arguably a top 5 quarterback. So I'm not sure why Skip Bayless doesn't think that Russell Wilson doesn't deserve that mega contract, and I'm not even sure why he thinks Dak Prescott is better than Russell Wilson. Skip Bayless said that he would take Dak Prescott over Russell Wilson. Dak Prescott has never been given the responsibilities that Russell Wilson has, and he never will. Dak Prescott, since his rookie year, has been given the gift of a great offensive line and a great running back. And people said, within that same time frame, people have said, well, Dak Prescott doesn't have much to work with, and he's having pretty good years. Well, you don't need to have a lot of good receivers if you have one of the best offensive lines in the game and one of the best running backs in the game. Because when you have two things like that, that means you're going to have a lot of time to throw. And Dak Prescott's a tall quarterback. So when you have a good offensive line, folks, it's very easy to scheme your wide receivers open because you have that much more time to find those guys open. That much more time to let those routes progress. Russell Wilson doesn't have that luxury. Dak Prescott has literally, you can technically say Dak Prescott has been spoon-fed since he's been since he started for the Dallas Cowboys. He's had everything ready for him to succeed. Dak Prescott is a decent quarterback, but I just don't see what the hype from him is all about. I don't get it. I don't think he should be getting paid more than $20 million a year. It'll be very, very interesting to see how those contract negotiations will turn out. I wonder what they're disputing about. I wonder what numbers that Dallas Cowboys ownership believes Dak Prescott should be getting. Because he certainly does not deserve more than $20 million. Dak Prescott has never been the reason why that offense is as competitive as it is. We've seen Dak Prescott struggle when Zeke was suspended. And then when Zeke's playing and that running game and offensive line is firing on all cylinders, that's when Dak Prescott has good games. It took for them to get Amari Cooper for him to finally somewhat sort of push the ball down the field. Otherwise, they don't trust him to move the ball down the field. All his passes are short to intermediate passes. This Dallas Cowboys offense doesn't trust Dak Prescott to be that gunslinger the way Russell Wilson is. Russell Wilson, again, accounts for the Seattle Seahawks offense, probably more, 50 to 60% of their output. Dak Prescott isn't capable of doing that and even putting up those type of numbers. Dak Prescott isn't even the best quarterback in his division. Russell Wilson is the best quarterback in his division. Dak Prescott isn't. Carson Wentz is better than Dak Prescott. When Kirk Cousins was on the Washington Redskins, Kirk Cousins I considered better than Dak Prescott. And I don't think he's better than Eli Manning. Eli Manning, for a very long time, since maybe the Super Bowl year, has not had a good running game and has had not had a good offensive line. He's just had good receivers. But we've seen that that's not a recipe to win football games because we haven't made it to the playoffs that many times. I think we made it to the playoffs, one or two times in the last decade? Or since we've won the Super Bowl? I wish Eli Manning was given that offensive line and Ezekiel Elliott a couple of years ago. And that's where we're going towards. That's what Gettleman is doing. He's building that offensive line. It's getting there. It's almost there. And he gave us Ezekiel Elliott and Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley is actually a little better than Zeke is. He's a little more explosive, a little more shiftier, moving around the line of scrimmage and finding those holes and breaking out of those holes. But you know what? Whatever. You can say that they're actually 1A, 1B. I'll get into that discussion later because I want to talk about Dak Prescott. He's just not that good of a quarterback. And you know what? I'm actually going to pull up the top 10 quarterback contracts. And I'm going to see who Dak Prescott should be getting paid more than. And I'm going to start at the top, and that includes Russell Wilson getting paid $35 million a year. Dak Prescott doesn't deserve to get paid Russell Wilson money. He certainly doesn't deserve to get paid Aaron Rodgers money. Aaron Rodgers gets paid $33.5 million. Matt Ryan gets paid $30 million. Matt Ryan has been successful, has been to the playoff a couple of times, has been pretty successful in the playoffs, including making it to the Super Bowl. The reason why the Falcons lost that Super Bowl to the New England Patriots is because of bad play calling, not because of bad play from Matt Ryan. Kirk Cousins gets paid $28 million a year. The reason why Kirk Cousins gets paid $28 million a year is because he literally led that Washington Redskins to be a competitive team and into the playoffs. And I know he hasn't had much success in the playoffs when he was with the Redskins, but without Kirk Cousins, that Redskins team was lost, didn't have an identity. They weren't always great on defense. Their defense came around last year. Their defense is a stout defense, and it showed last year, the year Kirk Cousins wasn't on that team. They never had the greatest wide receivers. Their best receiving option during Kirk Cousins' tenure there was Jordan Reed, was a tight end. Your tight end shouldn't be your best receiving option. It should be one of your better receiving options, but it shouldn't be your sole receiving option. That's why Kirk Cousins gets paid $28 million a year. Because the Vikings thought he can do even more better things with the amount of weapons that they have with Stephon Diggs, Adam Thielen, Kyle Rudolph, Matt Stafford. Matt Stafford, is in a similar boat like Russell Wilson. Matt Stafford is responsible for making that Lions team, that Lions offense competitive. Think about it, right? The Lions may not always make it to the playoffs, but they're always competitive. They have a fighter's chance every Sunday to win ball games, and that's because of Matthew Stafford. Because, again, ever since Matthew Stafford has been on that team, they didn't give him a good offensive line, and they haven't still given him a great running back, a good running back. Imagine Stafford with an offensive line like the Dallas Cowboys and Ezekiel Elliott. Derek Carr gets paid $25 million. I don't agree with that. But the reason why Derek Carr got paid $25 million is because who else were the Raiders going to go to for a quarterback? The Raiders did not have a good quarterback for a very, very long time. Then they finally found Carr, and they had to throw him that money. So I'm okay with that. Which is going to go to my next point. I can't knock the Dallas Cowboys for paying Dak Prescott a big contract. Because that's what the market is. The quarterback market right now, folks, there's more demand than there is supply. And as a result of a market like that, you're going to pay more than what you'd like for quarterbacks. You have to keep quarterbacks around. Prescott knows how to win games. But do I think he deserves more than $25 million a year, more than $20 million a year? No, I don't think so. I'll be a little flexible. He should be within the $20 to $25 million range. He should be getting Ben Roethlisberger money, Eli Manning money, Phillip Rivers, Cam Newton money. If Nick Foles can get paid $22 million, if Joe Flacco and Alex Smith can get $22 and $23 million, then sure, Dak Prescott can be in that range. But Dak Prescott doesn't deserve to be paid top 5 money. And I'm looking at this list. The only list I disagree, maybe the player that I really disagree with, is Jimmy Garoppolo getting paid $27.5 million. But, I think that was, a pressure move. Because I think the 49ers organization, after the whole Kaepernick situation, they really didn't have a quarterback. They didn't know who to go to. And Garoppolo showed some really, really good signs on the New England Patriots that, at the end of that year, heading into that offseason. So it made sense. Garoppolo won games for the Patriots. So it made sense for them, to give Garoppolo all of that money, to give him that mega contract. But Prescott, to me, I really don't see it. If you're not the best quarterback in your own division, how does Skip Bayless expect Dak Prescott to be in Russell Wilson's class? Russell Wilson is a Super Bowl champion. Russell Wilson has made it to 2 Super Bowls. I don't know. Dak Prescott hasn't made it to a Super Bowl yet. I don't even know if he ever will. I don't think he's the quarterback that gets this team to the Super Bowl. This Cowboys team is the best team in the division too. And I think they'll make it to the playoffs. But this the NFC conference is filled with competitive, clutch quarterbacks. Dak Prescott, to me, isn't that type of quarterback. I saw that Los Angeles Rams and Dallas Cowboys playoff game last year. The reason why the Cowboys didn't win that game is because Dak Prescott doesn't have the quarterback IQ to make adjustments at the line and to read defenses. Plays fall in his lap. The throws he makes are easy. They aren't difficult. He doesn't need to take chances the way Russell Wilson has to. That's why they lost that game. There was a point where they were driving the fourth quarter, late in the fourth quarter, and Dak Prescott got overwhelmed by all these schemes and blitz packages where it looked like the Rams were going to blitz. Instead of Dak Prescott staying poised and calling an audible, he ends up calling a timeout. He ends up burning timeouts. It was hard to watch. What are you, in year 3, year 4, and you can't pick this up? Prescott doesn't have that good of an IQ than a lot of these other quarterbacks. Like Russell Wilson, like Aaron Rodgers, Matt Ryan, obviously Tom Brady, Matt Stafford, Andrew Luck, Ben Roethlisberger, Phillip Rivers. I don't think Prescott's better than those quarterbacks. Carson Wentz, Kirk Cousins. I'm just looking at this list. Drew Brees. I think Prescott's a good quarterback. I think he's in the middle of the pack quarterback. And that's why I don't think the Dallas Cowboys should give him a mega contract. I don't think the Dallas Cowboys should give him a big money. But on the other hand, I would understand it because that's what the market is. I always have a chant when the Giants play the Dallas Cowboys. I always say Dak is whack. Because I personally do not see it. I'm not afraid of Dak Prescott when the New York Giants play the Dallas Cowboys. But I'm afraid of Carson Wentz. And I was afraid of Kirk Cousins when he was on the Washington Redskins. But I was never afraid of Dak Prescott because I just never saw it. I didn't get it. And I would tell all my friends this, all my colleagues this. I said, I don't get what the hype is about Dak Prescott. Of course he doesn't make bad decisions. He doesn't need to. The offense doesn't let him take chances. He has a good offensive line. He has a good running game to fall back on. So we'll see how that turns out. It's going to be very, very interesting. And I look forward to coming back on that podcast once that contract gets signed to talk about whether he deserves the money that he ends up getting. And folks, that's it. Thanks for tuning into episode 4. It's always a pleasure. Please follow my Instagram _unsportsmanlike_conduct. And if you're listening to this, make sure you subscribe. Thanks. Until next time. Peace.
The podcast you just heard was made using Anchor. Ever thought about making your own podcast? Anchor makes it really easy for anyone to get started. It's a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free. Sign up now at anchor.fm/new. That's anchor.fm/new to get started.